Hi everyone, this is Khushboo. In this year's Civil Services examination results, I've got AI at 80 and today I'm at BYJU'S and I'm going to tell you that how did I go for the note making process, why is the note making process essential, and what are the subjects in which we can go for the note making. So starting with why note making and why did I go for it. See, I am the kind of a person who finds it hard to remember things. For example, if I have some material on, say, the topic of health, which is located in four different books, then I find it hard to recollect it from those four sources. And when the question comes up, I might not write it in a very good manner, or I might not give it the best thing. So I might not remember that which fact was written in which book or which fact was written in which resource. So this is also what happened in my first attempt. Since I didn't have much time due to my graduation in that year, I couldn't aggregate my material. I had all the resources in a very segregated manner. And in the examination, you won't believe, but I didn't write a single fact or an example in my first attempt. And I think I paid heavily for that. I couldn't clear the mains. But in my second attempt, one thing was sure that I have to ensure that all the facts, examples are there. They come to my mind whenever I see a question, whenever I categorize that question into a topic from the syllabus, and I can remember the accurate fact for that. So if you think that you also find it hard to remember these things, then you can follow this strategy. And then the next thing is it depends from person to person also. For example, personally, I like everything very much planned, organized, written down. So I like the process of note making. It really calms me down. So there are many people who I know who don't like note making, who think that it is a waste of time. For them, I think it depends from person to person. Don't think that just because I am telling you to do the note making, you should do the note making. You can try it for a while. If you think it's working for you, you are enjoying the process, it's paying the rewards compared to the time that you have invested, only then go for it. Otherwise, you can skip it. So, next thing is that I'll tell you how to do the note making. So, first, let's discuss about the note making for the prelims. So, for prelims, I think there are subjects, let's say polity, modern history, art and culture. So, how did I go about the note making in that? So for polity, there's a Lakshmikant book, which is an amazing book. But if you go for the note making in that, I think you will write another Lakshmikant. So I didn't do any note making for the subject of polity in prelims. For modern history, I did make the notes. So for modern history, what I did was I clubbed it into chapters. So there are already chapter names that are mentioned in Vipin Chandra or the Spectrum. So chapter 1 notes were there, chapter 2 notes were there. These notes were only with respect to prelims point of view. So these notes didn't help me during the mains. No, they didn't. These were only for the prelims. So I ensured that this notebook of mine, which was the notes of modern history, has every fact that might be needed, that might need to be remembered. And if I'm doing any test series, then those test series questions which I am unable to solve, which I think are very good facts, which I need to remember, but I've missed it in the book, or those are not mentioned in the book, then I would ensure that these also go into my notes. So at the end of those 2 or 3 years, I had a notebook which consisted of all the relevant facts from the modern history, and I didn't need to study anything else for the prelims. About environment and economy, I think I didn't go about any note making because the books for those sources are already sufficient enough and you can't make notes of those books. These are very comprehensive books. Regarding ancient history, so for ancient, we follow the 11th class old NCRT. For that, I made notes. Again, chapter wise notes. I ensured that every chapter is summarized in my own language and it has all the relevant facts that needs to be remembered. So these notes helped me ensuring that I don't need to read the book during the prelims and I can revise it in a day and maybe in half a day. So this is what helped me. Regarding art and culture, I didn't make any notes because Nitin Singhania is a very large book. So you might not even be able to read it properly. So I didn't go about any note making in Nitin Singhania. So about geography, what I did was I made the notes of 6th to 10th class NCRT. The reason being that those NCRTs are very important from point of view of prelims, but these consume a lot of time if you read them book wise, because there is a lot of irrelevant data also given, but the relevant also. So I made notes of 6th to 10th class NCRTs, again chapter wise notes. And for 11th to 10th class NCRT, I read the books because those books are really important. Every word of those NCRTs is important. So it wasn't possible for me to make notes. One thing you would have seen that I was very choosy about where to make notes, which chapter to make notes, which books to make notes of, which not to. The reason being that I ensured that whenever I'm making notes, see, note making definitely consumes a lot of time. So I ensured that whenever I'm making notes, I ensure that it pays off at the end. I'm not just randomly making notes for the sake of making notes. So I ensure that. That is why I chose the kind of books I need to have the notes of, and I chose the books which can't be made notes of. So for 6th to 10th NCRT, when I had the first reading, I knew that these are the NCRTs which are important but can't be read book-wise, will consume a lot of time. But for other books, I knew that these are the books which are very important but had to be read word-wise. So if a book has to be read word-wise, it means you can't make the notes of. For example, Lakshmikant. Every word over there is important. Every word can be made, converted into a question. So you can't have notes of that Lakshmikant. So this was all about the prelims note making. So next we'll discuss about the mains note making. Let's first discuss about essay. So now you might be wondering that what about essay note making, or who does that or something like that, because I was told not to do that. So see, in my first attempt, I got 132 marks in my essay. At that time, I think the highest was in 170s. So this marks were very low. And in my second attempt, I got 141. Considering the kind of marks that people have got in essay this time, I think it was considered a decent score. So what made me increase my score given the level of paper was changed, given the marking was very strict? That note making. So I spent around 15 days completely to essay, obviously divided, like for example, after every week I would spend day or a 2 on essay. So total of 15 days in those 3.5 months of mains preparation. The reason being, I knew that essay really pays off at the end, because once your score in essay is good, it will decide maybe a good cadre for you. So a good score in essay is necessary. So what I did for this was, for example, I took 2 essays for this essay preparation. For example, the first test was there. In first test, let's say I was asked 4 essays. 4 essays were given and I was asked to write 2 essays among them. But what I would do is, I would make 4 broader headings of those essays. For example, if the essay was the increasing deglobalization in the world, or maybe if globalization is a myth or something, a reality, something like that. For example, the topic is globalization. This is the heading. So I'll write introduction. See, one thing you have to ensure is you can't restrict yourself in essay. You can't write one introduction and expect that every essay on globalization will be started in this way. So I ensured that I have 1 to 2 to 3 or even 4 introductions with me regarding globalization. It can be a story, it can be an anecdote, it can be data, it can be a quote, it can be anything. Or it can be, I don't know, some random report, or that is again a part of data. So you can start from anything. So this is how I ensured that there are 4 different kinds of headings that are available with me regarding this topic. And whenever the topic comes, I'll see that which kind of introduction suits the context of the topic more. So I'll also show you how I did that. Next, I'll also ensure that body. So in body, we will follow the idea of speckling. We all do. So I had also expanded the idea of speckling because sometimes it also includes maybe international angle. So this is already for history, or maybe humanities angle, maybe ethics part, geographical point of view. So I had made my own something. You can also consider another domains where you can write from. So from body, I'll see that for S for social or science, both social and science. From these point of views, what do I have on the topic of globalization? On the political aspect of globalization, economic aspect, cultural aspect, legal aspect, international aspect, historical aspect, ethics aspect, geographical aspect, all these aspects would be written in a word or a two or even a line. So that line was only understandable to me, that how I would convert that line into a very good paragraph in the essay paper. So because you can't write a single line on the social angle, you'll have to explain it, you'll have to connect it to the previous paragraph. So all that was already maintained. It was just for the content part. Next, I would ensure the ending. So the ending again can be something like a way forward types ending, or on a positive note, or it can again be a quote which gives you a hope for the future, or it can be anything. Or also, for example, the topic was globalization. It can also have a negative aspect, that what is happening in the world, like deglobalization. So I would write a few lines on the deglobalization also. So this is how my A4 size sheet for the topic globalization would look. So I did that for around 50 topics. Topics like women, topics like technology, fourth industrial revolution, democracy, maybe economics of India, what is India's image in international world. So these were the climate change, environment. So these were the broader topics that I had, and I wrote this kind of material for those topics. So this ensured that whenever a topic comes in the test series or in the, say, paper, I derive my material from this data. So once I derive my material from all this content that I have, I would have to ensure that that is put in the context. So about essay, it's not just about the content. So this is how I prepared the content of the essay, like these 50 A4 size sheets. But you also need the context. For example, I might have content on the topic of education, right? So I might have prepared possible introduction, possible conclusions, the body of the education, one A4 size sheet. But the topic, for example, in 2017 paper was that destiny of a nation is written in its classroom, something on those lines. So the topic is indirectly related to education. It's not directly related to education. So you can't be expected to write an essay on education. No, you can't. So you have to derive it into the context. So that is where the context comes into the picture. But that comes from the practice. So as I told you, I joined 2 test series. The first test series, I took around 4 to 5 tests, and that ensured that I got a hold on my essay paper. I got the topics, I could prepare the content. In my second test series, I again took 4 to 5 tests, which I ensured that now I'm writing in proper context. I'm writing proper temporal stuff for that essay, proper sectoral stuff for that essay. So this all was done by me in the essay preparation. And it took me around 15 days for all the note making process, for all the test giving process. So I devoted around 15 days in those 3.5 months of the mains preparation. So next I'll discuss about how I went for the note making process for the GS papers. So for the GS papers, again the note making for me started after the prelims. So it wasn't like my notes were prepared before the prelims and I just had to read during the mains preparation. I prepared the note after the prelims and I studied along with that. So what I did was, for example, GS 1, 2, 3. See, again, the notes need not be made for every topic. You need to analyze which topic should be made notes of. For example, in GS1, the topics of art and culture, history, you are reading that from the standard books. You don't need notes for those topics. But the topics of society, like communalism, regionalism. So these are the topics where you won't find good information in any one booklet. So you might find some static information in one book. You might find current affairs for these topics in another booklet. So you need to aggregate this data. So what I did again for these topics was, I picked out an A4 sheet, wrote the word communalism, wrote the definition, wrote its history, what has been the history of communalism in India as well as in the international scenario. Because sometimes they ask you that how do you compare communalism in India to international world, or how has it changed. So how has it changed? For that you need to know the history. Also, I would remember some facts. So I told you that in my first attempt, I couldn't write a single fact in my papers. So what I did was that because my material was segregated in various resources, I couldn't remember the right fact at the right point of time. However, while the note making of these GS1, GS2, GS3 and GS4, I wrote the relevant facts of that topic under that topic. So for example, in GS2, the topic of health is there. So in under the topic of health, I would write all the 4 to 5 facts which I would be remembering. For example, the number of doctors, doctor to population ratio by WHO, what is the GDP expenditure on health, something like that. So around 4 to 5 facts. And these 4 to 5 facts are used not just in the GS papers, but also in the essay. When you are writing the health aspect in the essay paper, you will remember that, okay, this was the fact that I had written down in my notes, and I need to write this fact in the essay also. For example, this time I think there was a question on health that local community level participation is required for health for all, something on those lines. So for that, you need to know why do we need local level participation? Because we have a poor doctor to population ratio. So for that, you need to mention that what is the doctor to population ratio? What is the expenditure? Since we have lesser expenditure, we need the local level intervention. For example, ASHA workers. So what are the schemes that government has initiated? So I would have written down all these in my notes. So let's discuss, for example, health topic in GS2. How did I go about the note making? So first, I would write the facts of health. What are the 4 or 5 relevant facts? See, you can't be expected to remember 8 to 10 facts of every topic. So you need to have 4 to 5 relevant facts related to that topic, which can be used everywhere. So next, I would be writing examples. Like, for example, the good and bad examples. For example, in India, something bad has happened in health sector. For example, during that, there was a Gorakhpur tragedy. So that would be a bad example. Good example, we can use the international examples of countries like Cuba, UK. So I mentioned those examples because in the conclusion, in the way forward, I can use those examples. Or these can also be the part of my introduction. Next, I would be writing the content for the health topic. For example, problems in the health sector. What are the solutions for the health sector? In the solutions, there can be 2 types of solutions. Ones that you are giving, one that government has done. What government has done? What do you propose? This is how my note making would look for the health sector. So this I did for all those topics where the content is not directly available, where you have different resources for the static, for the current. So, for example, topics like role of civil services, education sector, the society topics I already told you. Similarly for GS3. So this is how I went for the note-making process. For ethics, it's again almost the same, just the content has to be changed. For example, this was my, you can say, methodology which I used for GS1, 2, 3. But for GS4, it would be first, say, ethics topic. Let's take the topic of transparency. So it will start with the definition. That definition has to be written in your own words. It can't be a bookish definition, which is hard to understand, which is hard to remember, because every word in that definition matters. I would read the definition from various resources. For example, BYJU has also provided the definitions of these topics. So I would read those definitions, try to write those definitions in my own words. So definition would be there. Then there would be examples. So in ethics paper, you need to have good example. Those examples are 2 types of examples. Your examples, your own real life examples, and one the examples from the world, from the country. For example, what Mahatma Gandhi did, or there's any transparency, any example of civil servant who is known for his transparency, his or her transparency. So examples like that. Then there will be like, what are the problems in transparency, how we can deal with things in transparency. So something on those lines. So as you can see, there was a separate pattern that I followed for the ethics note making. There was a separate pattern that I followed for GS1, 2, 3 and the separate pattern for essay. How did I came up with this pattern was through tit and trial method. Like I also did some mistakes while the note making. But later I realized that how will this note making process make my answer writing more efficient? That was my only purpose, that I can remember the right fact at the right time in the right question. So that was my only objective. For that, I did the note making accordingly. So for all the aspirants out there, I suggest that please choose your own methodology. Don't try to copy this, because it might depend upon you, that how do you remember something in the paper. So try to find that and try to collect data, aggregate data in that manner. Thank you. I wish all the very best to you. I hope that you achieve all your dreams, you complete all your endeavors in the future, and I wish you all the very best. Thank you.